Let's get started. Hey everyone, Rich and Adam here from Idiot Seeking Village, a podcast where sad middle-aged white men tilt at the windmill that is the male loneliness epidemic. Adam, how the hell are you doing today?
Plenty of things I can complain about and wonder about, like why is there never enough coffee in the pot, but mostly uneasy of what you have planned for today, what darkness is going to come forth, and what level of anxiety it will produce. But other than that, I'm okay.
All right, anxiety, it's fine. So let's ask the important question. How do you feel about fascism? I think more importantly, how do you feel about the military being commandeered to participate in local law enforcement?
Oh, great. Of course you are. I can't think of a lighter topic than that. Who wouldn't feel warm and fuzzy having military people with large guns walking down the streets?
How do you feel about living in a society where you have to present your papers?
Oh, Jesus. Give me your papers.
So it feels very much like the Germans.
Very much.
Show me your papers, Adam.
Good thing I have my wallet on me at all times.
You know, I
But
think
speaking of the wife who forgets everything, then I'm going to be bailing her out a lot.
just have the sacrifice the kids' college fund for a bail fund, right? You need a nuclear family,
You
right?
think those kids are going to college?
That's up to you, buddy. Well, technically up to them, but
Who knows what college will look like in a few years?
might not be the same.
No.
Might not be the same. Yeah, so I think it's interesting, right? So you mentioned guns. That actually wasn't a thing. And actually still isn't a thing until today. Secretary of Defense Hegseth signed off on the order allowing for the potential for the 2,000 or so guardsmen currently deployed to D.C. to be armed going forward if they decide that is a necessary component of their deployment. And so you had...
Who's the they who finds it necessary? The National Guard or he?
It's at this point, it's the president, right? It's Trump through Hegseth, but Trump really who can determine, right? The 800 DC National Guardsmen and the 1,000 or so guardsmen from other states, all Republican governor-led states who've supplemented the force over the course of the past week. Up until now, they've just been running checkpoints, for pedestrians, for drivers, at metropolitan, metro transportation depots and hubs. Again, it's one thing to present your passport upon returning to the country and go through customs and immigration, right? When you go through a train or through a checkpoint or whatever, or in the airport. It's another thing to do that in your own capital, to do it in a city. And this is beyond unprecedented for us. I don't know of any historical precedent where something similar has happened. I'd have to dig in a little bit, maybe the Civil War, right? Because Washington is so close to the border with the Confederacy. But even then, I'm curious what kind of identification that you would...
Have drawings of you. This looks like me, right?
It's a daguerreotype, right? It's one of those early photographs, for sure. Yeah, it's been interesting. And it's something you and I have talked about, right? This kind of just progressive escalation of things. I think it's definitely concerning, right? You don't want to see armed military. I mean, it's bad enough that you have the military on the ground engaging in police actions and checking paperwork for people passing through. That should be concerning to anyone, even the most law and order type. Right. It should be extra concerning that they have guns or that they're now authorized to potentially have guns. That is absurd. There is no crime wave, right? Crime is practically, we're having this discussion last night
30-year low, right?
At dinner. 30-year low, not only in DC, but everywhere. And that's the thing about crime. It's so easy to jump on as this fear factor because it triggers people. You have a fight or flight response to it. But overwhelmingly, it's not random. Crimes from homicide to rape to child sexual assault are overwhelmingly perpetrated by a family member or a known acquaintance of the victim. Crimes of opportunity do happen, but that's not generally, the random person you run into is not whom you're going to be a victim of, right? You're unlikely to be smuggled by a cartel into sex slavery. You're likely to be kidnapped by the other parent in a nasty custody battle. And you see that with this guy, this Doge staffer, Ed Corzine, former Doge staffer, now he's with the Social Security Administration, and this is what led to all this, his supposed carjacking at 3 a.m. on a Saturday. And that's the thing that is getting glossed over. It was 3 a.m. on a Saturday.
Didn't they say it was like 15-year-old kids or something? That's what this is.
And
I don't know if that's true, but that's what
I think they arrested 1 or 2 of them on the spot, and a couple others got away. And that's kind of the behind the the justification for why they need to get out there. It's pretty flimsy, but yeah, it's supposedly it's a gang of 15-year-old kids, and look, the kid's 20. It's Saturday night. He's probably been drinking. He's out partying. He's back at his car at 3 a.m. Telling me he's getting carjacked by a bunch of 15-year-olds. It's a little fishy, right? Shouldn't be driving if you're in that condition, that you're not aware enough of your situation, that there's no self-awareness of where you're at. I mean, more likely, a 20-year-old, 3 a.m. on a Saturday, he's trying to buy something not exactly over the counter. And in the process, he had cash, and these kids decided to take advantage of that opportunity. 3 a.m. is 3 a.m. no matter where you are. It doesn't matter how many military you have patrolling and how many policemen. You've got to have some self-awareness and situational awareness. Yeah, random crime does happen. It is the overwhelming minority of actual crimes that happen in this country. Which brings me, we've got this kind of slow, progressive shift going on, right? You've got, if you think back 5 years ago, you have unwanted federal agents being sent anonymously in unmarked vans without clear identification to the Portland protests, part of the George Floyd protests that happened in 2020. You've got the protests that were happening outside St. John's Episcopal Church, just north of the White House, and Trump had federal, I believe the National Guardsmen, if I recall correctly, push back that group aggressively, violently, to do the photo op of him holding the Bible right in front of that church.
He wanted to know if they could shoot them. Do you remember when Trump asked if they could shoot bullets?
Yeah, fun. Yeah, you're shooting at peaceful protest. I find myself using that term, peaceful protesters. These are American citizens exercising their First Amendment right to petition their government for a redress of grievances. That is how the fucking system's supposed to work.
Yeah.
And you've got the president openly asking, can you shoot them? And then you've got the deployment of the Marines and the National Guardsmen to LA earlier this summer. And now the DC takeover of the National Guards, commandeering the Metropolitan Police Department to fight crime that's, by any reasonable recent standard, non-existent.
And how to break out the homeless encampments because they were so horrible. I just can only imagine what this is doing to tourism and all the businesses there that are losing tons of money as tourism just dries up.
I don't know if tourism has dried up yet. I know at least in the initial deployment, they weren't sending the National Guardsmen to high crime areas.
No.
They're running checkpoints, again, at transit hubs all across the city, vehicle, public transport, everything. They also just deployed them to the Washington Monument and the mall. And they basically were at tourist traps, and they're taking photos with tourists. Again, they're unarmed to this point, and they're basically just vacationing.
Yeah.
They're getting a free high school class trip to Washington, D.C. that's being paid for as part of active deployment, which costs money to us. To what end? Have you been to the Washington Monument?
Yes, many years ago.
There aren't even buskers and peddlers of little tchotchkes going on there. There isn't even that kind of low level quality of life crime, if you would even call it that, going on there. There's nothing happening there yet. We're doing this show of force.
Yeah, they're only creating Instagram moments for influencers to take photos with soldiers and...
I mean, you want to talk about criminals, Instagram influencers.
Savages.
One of the things, I think it's important for us to get a little bit of perspective here on how all this is happening, right? It should be concerning that the police and the military... We've been militarizing the police for decades at this point. Surplus, army gear and MRAPs. There's no reason for your local police department to have a goddamn MRAP rolling around on the streets, a multi-ton military vehicle. And that's been going on for, well over a decade at this point, and it's been pretty well documented. But now we're actively deploying National Guards and the military to our streets under questionable pretenses is absurd. I think I wanted to kind of jump back a little bit, right? Because, I've been reading through They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer, the Germans, right, 1933 to 1945. And I'm still working on it, but It's really an incredibly eye-opening read into the attitudes of everyday people immediately in post-war Germany about how their lives looked and kind of the start of the rise of fascism and what happened to their towns, how they perceived it, and what was happening during the Nazi regime, and like what, if any, like guilt or acknowledgement of what was happening really registered with them. It's one of those things I feel is underappreciated, and it's a well-known book, right? So plenty of people have read it, and I feel like it's started to become a little bit more mainstream now as we all kind of look around and go, why are people okay with what's happening?
I mean, mainstream as in, instead of the 100 people, it's like 1,000 people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The 3 people, aside from ourselves and our wives who might be forced to listen to this podcast and go.
This is not the Hunger Games.
But it's one of those things, and this is a problem with, let's just say, the American left and Main Street and liberalism in this country. Everything immediately jumps to like gas chambers. And he screams of fascism, and everyone goes, "This is ridiculous. This isn't happening."
Because that's the only
That's the thing
example
anyone remembers.
we have. Yeah,
the only thing people really remember, other than the military stuff, is oh shit, there were gas chambers
and war. That's you're going to think of fascism. You're like, oh, there are a lot of killing, fighting, gas chambers.
Yeah, but
Jews.
It didn't start that way. It took. Yeah, I mean, Hitler was in power for 12 years. He was in the streets, and the Nazis were a political force for about a decade prior to that, right? So it took about 2 decades of chipping away at norms and expectations to kind of get to that point. It's a slow bleed. So I want to actually share a few quotes from the book that kind of gets at the core what I think we're experiencing as Americans today, and I think should give us a little bit of preparation, right? How we should be maybe looking at some of this and perceiving it. So I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because the book is, about 70 years old at this point, and the wording is a little bit old-fashioned, but we'll kind of get to it, right? So, quote, "This separation of government from the people took place so gradually, each step disguised as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance. And all the crises and reforms so occupied the people that they did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter. One had no time to think. There was so much going on. The dictatorship and the whole process of it coming into being was above all diverting. It provided an excuse not to think for people who did not want to think anyway." End quote.
Sure, I could totally see that. I mean, that's a lot of reason why what's happening is happening, because they wanted the man in charge to be in charge, get rid of everything that came before him.
Do you remember that weird shit that the right-wing media and, commenters and conservatives were saying leading up to the election and right around the election last year when they were calling Trump daddy?
Oh, God.
On television.
I only thought that was Pedro Martinez.
No, yeah, it was Mel Gibson and all that. I mean, there was a lot of grown-ass men who go out there and are like, I'm an alpha male, I'm tough, I hate woke, and they're calling Trump daddy on national television, and it's just the weirdest goddamn thing. But it kind of goes with
Super creepy.
What he was campaigning on, where he's only I can fix this, only I can save what's going on, that kind of cult of personality leader figure that he's been doing.
I think definitely it's just the personality, because, I mean, it wasn't his first time around. He had already been here before, and he didn't do anything so special the first time around for the first 4 years.
Yeah.
So what in the world made people think it would be so different this time?
It's funny you say that, right? Because if you look back at his first term, it was just a revolving door of characters in and out, right? I mean, he had multiple secretaries of defense and speakers. I remember Scaramucci for 36 hours. He was a thing or something like that. It's just absurd, like this revolving door of clowns. And you haven't had that yet. We're about 10 months since the election, but we're 7, 8 months into the administration, and everyone's still there.
Because so many of them last time, what it was, he was going to I'm going to hire the best people, just the best people. And these best people would be there for only a few weeks, because usually they left because they were being investigated, or they just had a falling out, or they didn't like what was happening. They had some form of standards. They left or were arrested. But now when you control the DOJ and you only pick the people that you personally want who love you, shit changes.
Yeah, and I think this time around, it's a different mindset and a different attitude. He was a complete political outsider coming in with a largely inexperienced cabinet, and they didn't know how to work the government. But I think it kind of goes to, regardless, again, this escalating series of military and policing activities. That's all the hallmarks of Bannon right there, the flood the zone strategy and whatnot.
But he was there at the beginning and it didn't happen. So my thing is that there wasn't enough people when I went in with Trump who had his agenda, because they were, a lot of them might have been kind of new, but a lot of them also were old people who had a certain way of doing things.
Well, I'd say he didn't really have
government.
an agenda coming in.
No, but Bannon did.
Yeah, Bannon did, sure.
So he was like his, voice. And I think there was a lot of roadblocks, they call them guardrails they're using. And they were able to completely figure out a way of, like, okay, we were here last time. This is what went wrong. We need to just change that. And let's get rid of these people and rework it to eliminate these guardrails. And let's put all the people we want in. And all these people are just like diehard loyalists compared to before. Some were sketchy, but some of them were actually intelligent and knew this is not how we're supposed to do things. Mm-hmm. we can't shoot those people and make them move out of the way. I bet you now that would not be said to him.
No, I don't see Hegseth saying that, having any conscience about shooting people who are, out there exercising the First Amendment.
No, he could never say no to Trump. I mean, look about where he is. I mean, he was just 10 minutes ago, he was just a Fox News host.
That's the thing.
I know he's Secretary of Defense.
That's the other thing. This entire administration. So before you had the kind of that alt-right ecosystem, you had Bannon and all these others who were more on the fringe of society and the mainstream, right? And they were the ones kind of coming in. And again, these people are largely inexperienced and don't know what they're doing. And now you have these folks. This is an entire Fox News administration, right? These are all the speakers and people who have been on television over the last few years, campaigning and calling for certain things to happen in Trump's favor. And that's why he's put them in these positions. And these are not true believers who are coming in ultimately. And it kind of gets back to, hey, look over here, look over there, blah, blah, blah. It's got this giant game of 3-card Monte with what they've got going on, these kind of little escalating steps that this guy comes in. And for your average person who's got so much going on, it's comforting when he says, don't worry, I got this. I can handle this. I want to go back to the book real quick. Quote, each act, each occasion is worse than the last, but only a little worse. You wait for the next and the next. You wait for the one great shocking occasion, thinking that others will join you in resisting somehow. You don't want to act alone. You're not in the habit. And it is not just fear of standing alone that restrains you. It's also genuine uncertainty. End quote. It's one of those things. I think we see this all the time. You think, am I nuts? Is this crazy? You get this creeping self-doubt when you see what's going on and people call you, they say you're an alarmist. We sound like, Cassandra's, right? The prophetess of doom here calling for calamity. And you feel nuts. You feel isolated because day-to-day life kind of goes on as normal, even though things are objectively, if you take a step back and look, escalating in a way that, had they just started that way, you wouldn't be okay with.
But you know what? I think a lot of times we think of, okay, this is it. This is the end. That the end comes right away. That it's not a slow progression. But for some people, when these things do happen, it is the end. Right now, like with people losing their health care, not everybody's losing it all at once, but people are suffering, and they're suffering right now. Not us, but somebody else is. But it's not me. It's not everybody. It's not everything. And I think we're able to look past it because we're so used to it. We're so used to it just being like, just another bad day, just another shit thing happening, just more homeless people, more crime. It's all right. It just happens.
That's why you see all this othering of people. We're going to pick on trans people. We're like, what, 0.2% of the population? Something infinitesimal like that. That's why, there's so much focus on immigrants and immigration, right? Again, it's easy to be like, these people are weird. We're going to carve them out, broader society, and we're going to attack them. And every step you take against these people just gives you precedent to continue to pick out yet another group.
Sure.
and get another group. Everyone knows that Pastor Niemöller poem, right? First they came for the communists, but I didn't speak up because there was a communist, and they came for the socialists, I didn't speak up. Finally, they came for me, and there was no one to speak out for me. And it's this genuine progression of all this. And I think, you see this in contemporary media as well. Have you seen Andor?
No, not yet. I tried watching it, was it yesterday? No, the day before yesterday for like 10, 15 minutes, and it started to depress me. And I was like, I need my comedy. This is not right. I should be watching before bed. I watch this on the news all the time. I don't need more of it. It's more lightheartedness.
It took me a while to get into it. The first episode or two were kind of slow. You got to chug through them a little bit, but the action gets good. The reason I bring it up is
I want to watch it because to me it's the prequel to Rogue One, which is to me the best Star Wars movie in the last 40 years.
Yeah,
I challenge anyone to think otherwise.
It's the buildup of the rebellion against the Empire.
Yeah, I mean, right? I love the political aspect of it. Sounds so interesting, but I don't want to be living in it when it's happening.
I think it gives some good perspective. And, of course, you and I are huge Empire stans, right? We're ride or die Palpatine 2028.
Long live the Empire.
Yeah, somehow he will return again. We know that's going to happen. But I bring it up because one of the characters touches on it. And again, this is a show that just came out. And the line from the show is, the pace of repression outstrips our ability to understand it. It's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities than a single incident. And again, these are, art imitates life. And you've got this documentation of what actually happened 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago during kind of the rise of fascism and fascism kind of taking over various governments. And again, in our contemporary media, just reading the tea leaves about what's going on around us. And it takes root little by little, happens piece by piece. And we kind of all fall into the same trap every day because we're all just, hey, something's bad happening, but it doesn't affect me.
Or somebody else will take care of it.
Or someone else will take care of it. Exactly. There's a bystander syndrome. People will just all stand around. There's always this joke about, you see these videos of some sort of somewhat tragedy or someone struggling or someone getting hurt. And they're like, why the fuck was everyone standing around filming? Because you've always got this, someone else is going to step in and save them. And we rationalize it because, this isn't that big a deal. Or, someone else will step in. Or it's not even, maybe we don't even think it's worse than the last announcement. Or there's just so much of it, again, flooding the zone.
And what do I do?
That we don't know that it's even happening. And what do I do about it? And, by the way, my kid, I've got to take them to the hospital. I got to pay for braces. I got to make the mortgage, the car payment. My boss is being a dick. I got an unexpected tax bill. My car broke down. You've got all this shit going on every day. And we're like, I've got to worry about myself. And I've got to worry about me and what's impacting me directly. And I can't think about and worry about all these things that are going on.
And that kind of has always been the case almost, hasn't it? Like this tendency towards negativity.
So that's the thing. If you take a step back and think about when we were like kids and we were younger, right? What was, and even our parents, growing up, what did you have? You had the Soviet Union. You had the specter of communism, right? And prior to that, the specter of fascism. And before that, imperialism. You always had this external enemy that you could focus people's attention on and kind of wrap them up together and get them on the same page for the most part, if you think about it, right? And that doesn't mean that it was always free and clear what was happening, but you had this opportunity to unite people around shared values and shared concepts or shared identity. What was that?
Or a single enemy.
Right. It's cliches. But what could you do to unify Earth while you have an alien invasion? That was famously
Independence Day.
Reagan. It's Independence Day, but it happened in a summit between Reagan and Gorbachev. Reagan and Gorbachev had a summit early on in Reagan's first term, I believe it was, and Reagan goes in and is, hey, if aliens attacked us tomorrow, would you help us? And Gorbachev was like, yeah, of course, dude. Yeah, why
really? That really took
if
place?
Aliens attacked the Earth and they attacked the U.S., we would of course help to defend the U.S. Gorbachev was like, "Are you insane?" And
our level of our hatred is we hate you, but we hate aliens even more. So we're going to draw the line there because if they kill you, they're probably going to kill us next.
Exactly, it's a greater threat, and I think ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, you haven't had this greater threat. We briefly had a greater threat post 9/11.
Terrorism, yeah.
Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, the rise of ISIS. That's largely been quelled at this point, for the most part. Obviously, the Taliban, after billions of dollars and thousands of lives, is back in charge of Afghanistan.
Yes.
But generally speaking, we no longer have an external enemy to focus on. And any potential external enemy is actually being played politically and used to divide us at this point. You look at it, Putin and Russia are still anti-American, right? Sure. By any objective. They're anti-democratic and they're against any of our norms and principles. But you've got Fox News for years saying, why do we hate Russia? Like, why is Russia the enemy? Russia should be our friend. And it's like, where did this shit come from? We don't have an external enemy. So what we started to do is turn internally.
Right.
And the enemy is within. And that's why
it's in the house, people.
Rush Limbaugh for years, right, was ranting about liberals hate America and all this sort of stuff, and always, ranting about the internal enemies. And now we actually don't have any external enemies, so the only enemies are internal. And we're looking at that.
That's an interesting way of looking at it. To look at, hey, let's just pick the other side now. The fall of the Soviet Union, got nothing else to do. We're the top dogs. Who else can we blame? Let's blame this guy.
That's the problem. Why are we blaming?
Let's blame our neighbor.
Why are we not focused on fixing our problems instead of creating new enemies or creating new targets for outrage?
Good question.
It goes to power. It goes to authority, right?
Gotta have that money. They want that money.
Yeah. So I think, kind of finishing off with the whole, kind of flooding the zone. I mean, it's been about 50 days since the Epstein files statement came out, the FBI statement that
there are no files.
Right. After months and months of the files are on my desk, we're going to release the files and blah, blah. Oh, there are no files. Right. I think I just want to just kind of cover a couple of bullet points about how we've been flooding the zone.
Sure.
And specifically how the administration has been. First and foremost, of course, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, sent Congress home for the summer so that they couldn't force a vote to release the files. Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed by the Deputy Attorney General, transferred to a lowest security prison, from a low security prison to a minimum security prison. And the rumor is apparently she's going to be getting some sort of work release as well, which is unprecedented for someone who's convicted of sex trafficking to the extent that she is.
I can only imagine what she said to them.
The Wall Street Journal released those Jeffrey Epstein letters for his 50th birthday.
Drawings.
Yeah, it's hey, we have certain things in common, Jeffrey, and a $10 billion libel, slander, defamation lawsuit that Trump did afterwards. Of course, Trump has demanded on multiple occasions, loudly and publicly, for the Fed to cut rates and threatened Jerome Powell's job on at least 2 occasions that I can recall, distinct occasions, as well as openly saying out loud he wonders how he was surprised that he got appointed in the first place, despite the fact that Trump is the one who appointed him.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Texas redistricting and, California counter districting and whatnot that's going on right now. There's a new order to conduct a new census by the Department of Commerce, not Congress, which is mandated in the Constitution. We lost part of the U.S. Constitution on the U.S. Archives website. Section 1, Article 1, Sections 8, 9, and 10 were partially or fully deleted.
And they have not come back.
I believe they're back now,
okay.
But it was gone for a little over a day.
Did you miss him?
And they blamed a coding error, which is not how websites work.
Big Balls was sleeping at the job.
Yeah, he's in the Social Security Administration now. That should concern everyone. That's someone called Big Balls is running Social Security. He's not running it, but
all your monies will be mine.
He's there. They fired the head of Bureau of Labor Statistics because they didn't like the numbers, and now they've gone out there and say we're going to change the methodology around price indexing and the jobs reports. And
man, if you thought they were finagled before, boy, those numbers are going to be.
By the way, the guy that they're putting in place, the guy they put in, I forget his name off the top of my head. I don't have it written down here. He was at January 6th. And he's a Heritage Foundation guy. Yeah. So it's partisan hacks coming in, blatant partisan hacks. There was the blatantly, and so blatant that even the New York Times called it blatant, which credit to them, I guess, when they catch up on these things. The Sydney Sweeney, American Eagle.
Oh, God,
it was a blatant right-wing campaign. You had handful of people with just maybe a few dozen followers who did that kind of race baiting, whistle, kind of the whole racial element, and they jumped all over it and tried to make it huge news.
And it looks just like blue jeans to me.
Two of my personal favorites announced a nuclear reactor on the moon, which led to one of my favorite quips, which is, "Oh my God, how much is he in the files?" Of course, Trump threatened Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just hilarious.
Yeah.
He threatened the Washington Commanders Stadium project if they didn't rename the team back to the Redskins.
But what's so funny is not only is this zone being flooded, but at the same time, this list I know, but I forgot probably half of them, at least half of them, until you said them, because they were like a month ago.
I forgot
the whole Redskin Commanders thing. Totally forgot about Rosie O'Donnell, because she was really funny with that. She was like, basically bring it on, and then it kind of died after that. Totally forgot about those
things. Don't have any legs. And this is why writing down this list, that's why I'm sharing it right now. I forgot half these things, and I kind of like looking back at my timeline of things I read and things I looked at. I'm like, Jesus Christ! I'm like, that all this has happened, and I can't even take it all in. Obviously, Maureen Comey, James Comey's daughter, a former federal prosecutor, now fired by Trump because she botched the Diddy trial. The Late Show got canceled. Stephen Colbert, of course, and everyone saw that for what it was, a blatant part of the settlement against the lawsuit against CBS and Paramount. Of course, South Park has now picked up the mantle and just gone full throttle at the administration.
Super glorious.
Tell me if you remember this one. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, released some documents accusing former President Obama of conspiracy against Trump leading up to the 2016 election.
Yes. How's that going? Is it going anywhere?
I mean, it was blatant bullshit, but right-wing media tried to jump all over it as an example of treason, which it clearly wasn't, because the file came out in 2020. Obama hadn't been president for 4 years, and it's all been sitting there just basically documenting, hey, Russia tried to, but didn't succeed in hacking any voting systems. What they did is they did a media campaign. Sure. They were blitzing to try to change hearts and minds, and that's all documented. And they tried to jump on this as some sort of example of treason to undermine Trump's, legitimacy of his presidency. Again, 8 years later after the fact and removed from anything.
See, if I'm the Democrats and I'm liberal and I'm Obama, I would be like, bring it on. Let's bring it on. Just bring it on. Just bring it on.
Which I think was largely the response. I think Obama was like, go fuck yourself. For all intents and purposes. And he's, come on, bring it at me and try and prove any of this shit.
I think that's why Gavin Newsom right now is resonating so much after all these tries that he's done it. But now that he's trolling Trump, he is doing exactly what Trump usually does, but almost better. And it's hilarious.
Oh, he's doing it better.
Spreading. And you watching this and you just say, this is what you guys should be doing. Just give it back to them exactly how they want it. It's delicious.
It is. It's, I've got my problems with Newsom, but Camille Zapata is his PR director, I believe is her title. And she's the person behind those Trump tweets, and she's doing a fantastic job. And I think it just goes to show just how pathetic leadership is in this country, that, someone like Newsom, who is himself a problematic politician, is just this example of how there's just such a lack of leadership that people, again, a problematic character like Newsom is just able to kind of charm people right now through, just mocking Trump's style. And because remember, Al Green shouted during the not the State of the Union. Was it the inaugural?
Was it the State of the Union?
Did we have? Yeah, it was State of the Union.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, because Trump would have done that. Yeah, after he got inaugurated, and the Democratic leadership censured him, and it was just embarrassing. It's like you have during Biden State of the Union, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert screaming and shouting and making complete fools of themselves, and it was fine. And now you have.
Was it Obama? Didn't that guy yell liar at him?
Yes, you lie. Yeah, I forget who that was. Yeah, exactly. And then they censure Green for actually speaking up. They put up those stupid freaking, auction paddles, not true or fake or whatever the hell they were saying, And then you have Hakeem Jeffries, who was just an embarrassment at this point, right? He's, I'm setting records for filibusters. And the moment he sets the record, he puts down the fucking mic and just lets the legislation pass. What was the point of that? It's all for show. And so, again, it just speaks to the lack of leadership we have in this country, that the opposition is Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, well,
at
you
this
have
point.
Republicans who are right now basically like spitting on decorum and process, and the Democrats who want to just be like, okay, can't we just relax and hang out and just talk about it? It's like they just don't do anything while the other people are just running roughshod, and they don't. It's just an ugly.
But that list, again, you yourself, and this is why I wanted to read that out, is you forget half this stuff. And that's
Yeah.
not even half of what went on. It's just the stuff that I could recall that I came across, and it's not even a comprehensive list of everything. It was just kind of focused more on what the administration, for the most part, and the people aligned with the administration were specifically doing at that time. And think about it. The fury behind the Epstein files,
Right.
not even 2 months already, less than 50 days ago, was something that I don't think united the country in a way that we'd seen since the killing of bin Laden.
Nothing unites Americans quite like pedophiles.
Bold statement, Adam. Bold statement. So clearly you have a...
We found our answer. It's pedophiles.
Wait, I'm not...
We could all unite together to fight pedophiles.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'm just glad you threw that
that's
word
a
in.
B
Yeah,
one.
just-
No. How dare you insinuate such a thing?
But the point is, this is by design, right? Again, flooding the zone. And when you discuss like fascist takeovers, right? Nazi Germany always gets a lion's share. Hitler gets a lion's share, right? And again, what do people remember? People remember a war and they remember concentration camps. But I think it's important to look at it. These things don't happen by accident. And
Right.
you got to look at the bigger picture, take a step back of how did we get here? And again, Nazi Germany gets the lion's share, but like Francisco Franco ruled Spain for 40 years. Salazar, his regime in Portugal lasted almost 50. Mussolini ran Italy for almost a quarter of a century before getting the hook. Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Greece, Croatia, Romania, and currently Hungary have all had these kind of fascistic, uniparty states, and they've trampled any sort of opposition. And by any objective measure, they're fascist states, right? Dictatorships. And you read the stories and what's going on, they'll tell you the same thing. I had things to focus on. I had my own shit going on. And most of the time, nothing affected me directly. And when you saw something that would affect you directly, you kind of just got in line and you didn't rock the boat.
And they also had the fact that they all had in common is a great deal of poverty and a lot of crippling debt for the country, and probably why they had so much poverty. But we're not quite there yet. We're getting close. We're knocking down the
economically,
door. We got a lot of the debt. We have a lot of income inequality, but we could technically try to equal that out where it's not.
Hey everyone, Rich here jumping in. About a day after Adam and I recorded this episode, The Independent released an article citing unnamed Pentagon officials and documents obtained by Fox News that 1,700 National Guardsmen will be deployed across 19 states in support and administrative roles assisting ICE. It's confirmed that they will be serving under Title 32 and technically under state command to assist with federal missions, as we'll be discussing next. This follows a July announcement from the Pentagon regarding deployment under Title 32 and adds 500 troops to the original total discussed at that time. Also concerning is that the implied threats to other cities and the comment about a national emergency that we discussed is no longer implied, with President Trump announcing that he's intending to send troops to Chicago next, and followed by New York, though an actual deployment has not happened yet. And based on what he's saying, clearly sounds like, it could be an indefinite future and continues to be a threat, but he's outright named Chicago and New York as the next two targets for National Guard deployments. So whenever, wherever you are listening to this, please be safe. I hope the best for you. And I think just a little friendly reminder that whatever you allow your government to do to others, they will eventually then do to you. And back to the episode. All right, so I think this is what brings us to Donald Trump's recent executive order declaring a crime emergency in the District of Columbia and the unprecedented commandeering of the Metropolitan Police Department. And I think we need to establish a little bit of context here to understand why the hell this should be so concerning and why, despite everything going on in your life, you should care. So the 1973 District of Columbia Home Rule Act established certain rights and privileges to the residents of Washington, D.C. Up until that point, D.C. was run by Congress.
Okay.
And the Home Rule Act established an elected mayor and a council allowing residents to elect representatives and pass local laws and ordinances for the first time. If you've ever seen the DC license plate, it says taxation without representation for a reason. The Home Rule Act partially closed a loophole that disenfranchised residents of Washington, D.C., but it stopped short of allowing them to elect federal representatives. They're not a state. And so, again, they don't have representation in Congress, but Congress represents them directly just because of the special nature of the Capitol. And one of the provisions of the act, because, again, it's subordinate, it's not its own state, and it's subordinate to the federal government, to Congress specifically, allows the president, the executive, to take control of the DC's police forces. And it's found in Section 740 of the Home Rule Act. And Section 740 allows for the president to commandeer the DC Metropolitan Police Department, the MPD, if they determine that special conditions of an emergency nature exist, which require the use of the Metropolitan Police Force for federal purposes. And what that means in practice is the president could assume control for up to 48 hours without notifying Congress. They could just decide there's an emergency and I don't have to wait for paperwork. I'm doing it and I get it for up to 2 days. And to continue beyond 48 hours, they need to give basically written justification to Congress. So the federal control can last up to 30 days, even if Congress is informed, and continuing beyond that requires an act of Congress. So basically, I'm doing this, I can do it at the drop of a hat, I can do it for 2 days, I can extend it up to 30, but I need Congress to approve it, and to go beyond, I need Congress to act to approve it. So as of writing, Trump has indicated he intends to do so, stating, quote, "I don't want to call a national emergency." Interesting wording there, my add-in.
Don't make me, I don't want to.
If I have to, I will, just what you were saying. But I think the Republicans in Congress will approve this pretty much unanimously, end quote. Representative Andy Ogles and Rep. Anna Paulina Luna have planned or have introduced already resolutions to remove the 30-day limit on presidential control of the MPD and grant him longer-term authority over the DC police. Now, again, that wording, a national emergency, is interesting, right? Because that authority is only specific to DC. It's not, doesn't go beyond the borders of the Capitol, again, due to its unique federal status.
Therefore, it can't really be national emergency.
You can't commandeer police forces in other states. It doesn't exist as it is. But he's telling us what he's thinking, right? He's forecasting what he's planning to, talking about a national emergency. But a national emergency regarding what exactly?
Because crime and homelessness is not a national emergency.
I think some would argue that crime is, they already are. They're saying crime's a problem. It's not. It's at multi-decade lows.
But even if crime was, it's not a national emergency. It just exists. It's kind of like breathing. It exists. When a tornado hits Kentucky, it's not a national emergency. It's an emergency in Kentucky. But we don't be like, all right, let's lock down the whole country.
Yeah, but they've been talking about immigration as a national emergency for a long time. They've been telling us exactly what they're planning. And so I think what I want to do here is turn to an ongoing analysis by two media outlets, the Cochise Regional News and the Phoenix New Times. These organizations have obtained a cache of documents relating to the internal plans crafted in the year or so leading up to the election that align with the stated aims of Project 2025. Jesus.
Project 2025, yes.
Project 2025, the Heritage Group's Project 2025.
Which I've never heard of before.
Yeah, what is Project? Who
I don't know
knows?
who these
no
people
one's ever
are.
Heard of these things.
Yes, they might have worked for me before, but I don't know who they are.
But I think it's important, right? There's a good analysis that they're doing. It's an ongoing investigation. I believe they've only published 1 or 2 parts so far. But it's going behind the mechanisms of how law enforcement is being commandeered by federal authorities. And I think you need to start with, post 9/11, there was a lot of reorganization, integration of much of American law enforcement. And on its own, again, you didn't really have too much going on domestically. And so it kind of evolved into a sort of modern day counterintel program where it was really more about surveilling and disrupting activist groups for the most part. And as you've seen, for the past 8 to 10 years, they've been turning those from militia groups like Ruby Ridge and Waco and, all these kind of right-wing groups, the Timothy McVeighs of the world, focusing on leftist groups, Antifa and all that.
Sounds very Hooverish.
That's the whole point, right? Again, counterintel pro. It's been turning very similar like that over the past few years because there really wasn't anything else to focus on. So, quote, "One of the most concerning proposals in the Border Security Work Group documents would create a similar structure, but ostensibly for identifying and deporting immigrants. The Border Security Workgroup recommendations revolved around one central line of operation: to dramatically restructure and militarize domestic law enforcement through the course of this year. End quote. So you see what's happening, right? We've already had this dramatic rise in federal immigration actions, budget, and hiring, right? ICE got all this money through the one big bill. National Guardsmen and Marines were deployed to LA, and now the commandeering within DC. These aren't isolated incidents. These aren't happening just because. And now the administrations continue to chip away at that to create police forces accountable to the president, right? Continuing from the article, quote, fusion centers as they exist today integrate the efforts of state and local law enforcement within the Department of Homeland Security and other federal agencies such as the FBI. While the current fusion center system does investigate and interdict crimes committed by transnational criminal organizations such as Agua, local law enforcement, for the most part, does not engage in matters of federal immigration law enforcement. The internal Project 2025 documents obtained by Cochise Regional News and the Phoenix New-Times propose creating a wholly new fusion center-style system. This law enforcement infrastructure, they say, would incorporate 4 tiers of command: regional command, sheriffs, municipal police, state troopers; state command to oversee the regional command; district command, which will coordinate between states within a geographical region; and lastly, headquarters command to direct it all. End quote. So that headquarters command on an org chart, again in these documents, leads to a commander of domestic security operations. Someone who is in the document appointed by the president of the United States to take direction on how to conduct operations in a manner decided by the president. So, again, all the attention and a lot of the backing for these military takeovers and the military deployment as local law enforcement is focused on immigration and immigration enforcement. And he can say, okay, it enforces immigrants. I'm on board with ICE, right? I'm cool with everything that's going on, secure the border, blah, blah, blah. I think should be more concerned. Again, from the report, quote, documents we've obtained discuss potential workarounds to laws that prohibit most military engagement in matters of domestic law enforcement. Documents also show the group crafted presidential actions directing military support to civilian law enforcement and contemplating invoking the Insurrection Act, which would allow for active military participation in domestic law enforcement. End quote. So right there, you've already got, they're starting to shift. Okay, what else can we do here? And how do we expand the scope of what we're capable of doing? And I think that last part, invoking the Insurrection Act, is key. So there's another article by the Washington Post, and they've analyzed a different set of Pentagon documents about mobilizing the National Guard and the creating of a rapid response force to respond to incidents in other states across state lines. Quote, the Trump administration is evaluating plans that would establish a domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force composed of hundreds of National Guard troops tasked with rapidly deploying into American cities and facing protests or other unrest, according to internal Pentagon documents reviewed by the Washington Post. The plan calls for 600 troops to be on standby at all times so they can deploy in as little as 1 hour, the documents say. They will be split into 2 groups of 300 and be stationed at military bases in Alabama and Arizona with purview of regions east and west of the Mississippi River, respectively. End quote. And this is something they're doing to circumvent Posse Comitatus. Posse Comitatus is an act enabled in 1878 after the Civil War, which restricts the use of federal military personnel for domestic law enforcement. It's kind of one of those Reconstruction era, kind of pre-Jim Crow type of deals. The purpose of Posse Comitatus was to ensure that civilian law enforcement responsibilities remained with civilian authorities, not military occupation, unless specifically authorized by Congress. And that's important, right? Law enforcement is supposed to enforce laws. The military is supposed to defend us against the enemies of the country. You don't want the military deployed against citizens, because what does that mean? It means citizenry is the enemy of the country.
And that's clearly don't need it.
They're arguing you do. We look at this and go, we're not the enemy. We're the citizens of this country, and we have a right to petition our government and say, what you're doing is fucked up and we don't agree with it and it's wrong. And it's an incredibly problematic view to be like, I'm setting the military against citizens, because you are just passively saying right there, citizens are the enemy of this country. And you do not want any legal precedent for that. You don't want that to be a step that's ever taken.
Correct.
So what it looks like right now is two sections of the U.S. Code are being used to support that whole quick reaction force and get around the Posse Comitatus. The first is the Insurrection Act, which got mentioned in that report by Cochise Regional News and the Phoenix New-Times, specifically Title 10 of the U.S. Code, which provides exceptions to the Posse Comitatus Act and give the president broad authority to deploy the National Guard in federal service under federal command and use the military within the U.S. under certain circumstances, such as suppressing insurrections, enforcing federal law, or protecting civil rights when locals are unwilling or unable to do. And those are the ones we largely know or we've learned about at some point. The Rodney King riots, LA was overwhelmed. They called in the National Guard to help. Kent State shootings, the campus shootings during the protests during the Vietnam War. Again, Ohio was overwhelmed. They brought in the National Guard, and students got shot as a result. And probably the most famous one everyone remembers is school integration. Post Brown versus Board of Education, and the governor of Arkansas refused to integrate the schools, and Eisenhower sent in the National Guard to allow the students, right, to force integration of the schools. And otherwise, that generally only gets invoked when there's like a natural disaster, hurricane, wildfire, flood, landslides, things of that nature. And I think what's concerning about both the Pentagon documents and the Quick Reaction Force and these analyses by WAPO and Cochise Regional News and the Phoenix New-Times is that the administration is also looking at a questionable legal precedent for Title 32 of the U.S. Code, right? So, hey, we've got the Insurrection Act that's pretty specific, doesn't really give us a lot of latitude. What Section 32 allows us to do is National Guards serving state missions under state command with federal funding, training, and support and purpose. They essentially are looking like, okay, we have a federal mandate. We're getting federal support and money and training and a mission. How do we grab these National Guardsmen to commandeer them for law enforcement activities? Because we're giving you money for this. And by the way, the mission is to protect federal property and federal functions along these lines. It's a sketchy legal basis to be able to kind of stretch that, but that's what they're starting to do. If you think about the 2020 protests in the wake of George Floyd, is the federal government justified its presence in Portland by saying they were citing executive orders to protect monuments, memorials, and federal property. But the mayor of Portland, the governor of Oregon, and even the local Congress people, right, at the federal level, were like, we don't want them here, get them out. We didn't ask for this. Yet they pushed that through regardless. So they're kind of setting these precedents little by little here and there. So going back to the Washington Post article, quote, the 300 troops in each of the two headquarters locations would be outfitted with weapons and riot gear, the documents say. The first 100 would be ready to move within an hour. Second and third waves ready within 2 and 12 hours notice. The documents note, or all immediately deployed when placed on high alert, end quote. And so I think it's important for us to understand like how this works, right? So as it stands right now, you need the governor of your state to declare a state of emergency. There's a clear line of escalation. They petition FEMA or the Department of Defense for support. And then the National Guard gets activated under state control with federal backing and resources, right? That's how currently emergency works. The Quick Reaction Force is looking to bypass those checks and balances and that kind of process and hand control directly to the president, or at least a cabinet member within the executive branch, presumably Secretary of Defense Hegseth at this point. And that kind of brings it back to where we started, because taken individually, you deploy national troops, National Guardsmen to clear a path to the church. You send them unwanted into Portland. You send the Marines and the National Guard into LA, and you invoke the Insurrection Act to commandeer the DC National Guard. And it's easy to forget some of these situations, but it's a pattern of using military force against U.S. citizens, often when they aren't even asked for or wanted, or there isn't justification behind it. And it's continually escalating. Again, this morning, Hegseth put in the approvals to arm those 2,000 or so National Guardsmen who are in D.C. And why are they being armed? They're not being shot at. They're taking photo ops of tourists. They're doing checkpoints and checking paperwork for people. Why do they need guns? And by the way, this isn't police service pistols.
Yeah.
They're military. They have military grade guns. That's automatic weapons.
M16s.
That's exactly. That's not even the assault rifle you or I could potentially buy. Those are semi-automatic at best. These are automatic. And we're actively in this process, and it's just becoming more and more normalized. This should be concerning. We should all just be Honestly, we should all be marching in the streets demanding an end to this, but we're not, because it's this piece by piece, a little bit of chipping away at our norms and expectations around this.
Yeah, the more you talk, the more I'm thinking, like, how, I don't want to use the word brilliant, like Mitch McConnell was, when he just, everybody keeps fighting for Congress. Who's going to be in charge of Congress? There's just so many people we have to deal with. Why don't we just focus on the Supreme Court? And then you get your judges in place. Then you get a president who puts in a puppet DOJ, who basically is your soldier of law. And with them on board, you just could run roughshod over the Constitution or attack whoever you want. Oh, I want these people sued. Well, we don't really have any legal standing, but okay, sure, let's do it. And it's amazing, and it's playing out the way they want, where it's like, all right, let's find what loopholes we need to find. Well, can we bend those loopholes? Maybe, but let's just do it. The Supreme Court will just say what we want. Okay, great, let's do it. And it just unfolds until we are where we are now.
Yeah, no, it's the long game. It's the ground game. It's, if you use a football analogy, it's the running game. It's getting yards and feet slowly, piece by piece, to move downfield and kind of reach your goals. We all get dazzled by the presidency because the executive is a one-person job, effectively. And then you look at the Supreme Court, you only need 9 people. And out of those 9 people, you only need 5. And then, is what we talked about last time, 435 members of Congress, of the House of Representatives. You need 218 of them. You need 51 people in the Senate. There are layers to the levers of power in this country, and there's some of them are easier to grab, and some of them are less obvious and require just different amounts of effort to do. And if you can grab 5 seats in the Senate, 5 seats in the Supreme Court, 5 seats on the Supreme Court, and you can grab 51 in the Senate and 218 in the House of Representatives, suddenly you don't need to win it all. No. You need 51%.
It's a whole lot cheaper.
You need 50% plus one person, and it's a lot cheaper to divide and conquer. And
they don't have to run. They don't have to do anything. You already spent a ton of money getting that guy in office for president. Now we just got to pick a judge.
But now that you have that power, or at least you have that control over the levers of power, and we've seen this for years, it used to be, especially with the courts, that they would use cases defensively. You have certain rights and liberties in the Constitution, and they would be used defensively. Over the last 15 years or so, especially, what you've seen is a shift. You've seen a shift to using the courts offensively as an attack method against laws and norms and statutes that you don't like. It's not about falling back on the Constitution and what your rights are. It's using those rights to attack those people whom you want to disenfranchise and take power away from. And it's problematic. And this is how things start to slowly shift underneath our feet, and things change almost imperceptibly. Who do you know that regularly follows the Supreme Court? And no, I don't do it myself. I probably know 5 to 10, maybe at most cases, and that's probably 5 to 10 more than the average person knows about. And if people can even remember the core ones that they learned in high school, the Dred Scott decision, Brown versus Board of Education, and all that, you're asking people for a lot. I think that kind of is where I want to end here with one last quote back at They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer. Quote, "And one day, too late, your principles all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception has grown too heavy, and some minor incident collapses it all at once. And you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. The world you live in, your nation, your people, is not the world you were born in at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring. The houses, the shops, the jobs, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying with the forms, is changed. Now you live in a world of hate and fear, and the people who hate and fear do not even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. And now you live in a system which rules without responsibility even to God. The system itself could not have intended this in the beginning, but in order to sustain itself, it was compelled to go all the way." End quote.
I really thought I had the lack of faith on society cornered, but I think you got me beat by quite a few miles.
You're going to be my comic relief, Adam.
Oh, God. The devil's advocate when I'm the devil. I thought I was Jesus.
You're playing both roles. You're the angel and the devil over the shoulder at the same time now.
Man, that's...
How you feeling?
I think I have a little smidgen more faith that, I do think a lot of this is like Christian nationalism, and they're just using Trump because he somehow can speak to the people in a way that people can't really comprehend, and they're using him for that. But he's, unlike some of these other countries you've mentioned, and like Hitler and all these types, he's old, and he's not going to live forever, Trump.
Fascist regimes tend to last 30 to 50 years.
And so that means he's either going to be his children or J.D. Vance they don't have the swagger that Trump has. I mean, they have about as much swagger as like his bronzer that he uses. It's just, they just don't have that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm hoping that they're peaking too early.
Yes.
Because you are still in a country where people are still allowed to share information, and they're hurting a lot of people too quickly who they need still. Mm-hmm. Think it might backfire. I'm hoping it backfires. And that's where I stand. Because I got to be somewhat hopeful. And I know that there isn't an event that usually has people who will protest because you're sending people in here for this reason. All right, they want to try to stop crime. There's not really any crime. It's like almost no harm, no foul. It's okay. They're here. They're there. They're doing this. But I think once people find it a nuisance or their freedoms are trampled on, like truly trampled on, that they actually liked, I think the people in this country have a way of just snapping and flipping really fast. And I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, right? I mean, ultimately, we saw it, I think, yesterday. You and I were sharing something in our chat, was right that Musk, who was talking a month ago about creating a new political party and peeling away votes, is now quietly shelving all those plans, has not moved ahead with any of them. Apparently, he scheduled a bunch of conversations and meetings with various groups, Libertarian Party and others, and then just canceled or didn't show up. And now he's backing J.D. Vance quietly behind the scenes for the presidential run because Trump's, again, 79 years old. He's there trying to squeeze as much juice out of him 100%. As possible, and then basically pass it over to Vance as the heir apparent. And, that does give me hope that they aren't actually trying to fuck with the elections. Though they are going to try to cheat to win, which, again, as we talked about last time, is perfectly allowed. Shady, but it's perfectly allowed around some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think, though, the cheating that will be required to win, I think is going to throw too many people off. Because I don't think
anyone's going to care. No one's going to give a shit about redistricting.
Not the redistricting. I'm just saying that I'm hoping it doesn't have the impact, and that if you see National Guard people out of certain voting places, that people are going to be like, wait a minute, they're preventing us from voting. I think you're going to have a ridiculous blowback.
I think here's the problem though. If you start to get armed National Guardsmen and you get them outside of polling places, you're only going to get them in specific areas, right? Where the demographics play against the party in power, right? That's just how it works. They don't have enough people to deploy to every single area, which is why I think part of this whole local law enforcement being subsumed into this kind of national structure is part of it, right? So that you can have actual ground coverage everywhere and start to intimidate voters, right? Check IDs, check paperwork, and things of that nature. But think about where we live, right? Mm-hmm. You've got so many people who themselves or have family who work for the police in some capacity. They're not opposed to cops, right? They're not bothered by it. So if they have armed policemen or armed National Guardsmen standing outside, they're going to be half the people are going to be like, I don't feel safer with this person being armed around me. The other half are like, oh, great, a cop, right? And unless they see actual violence being inflicted on someone whom they don't believe should be a recipient or a victim of that violence, they're not going to change their minds. So you could have armed policemen and armed guardsmen outside of polling places. And unless something happens that causes that moment where someone snaps and realizes this is fucked up, I don't think it's going to happen ultimately.
But I think those people are also, if they're, outside with guns, they're not going to change too many people's minds about voting because it's a police officer. Some people might, but I have a feeling people just go vote. But some people might think, man, I didn't know things were this bad that we need all this security in front of our schools right now.
It's a matter of perspective. I'll give you a little story. We had a college friend of ours. She went on a birthright trip after we graduated, and we were at a mutual friend's house for a party after she got back. And she's, I have a long-standing policy. I'm like, I will not fucking go to Israel. I will not go to the Middle East. It's a fucking war zone.
Yeah,
I have no interest in ever going. I have a friend who went with his mom, like on a church trip and whatever. I'm like, you're goddamn nuts. Absolutely not. You never know what's going to happen at any given moment. And the last thing I want to be is a foreigner in a volatile war zone, right?
Especially an American foreigner.
Especially an American foreigner. I'm a target for more people than I'm comfortable with. But she was talking about how, it's so super safe. It's just like here, the neighborhoods and whatnot. And everywhere we went, we had an armed Marine with a machine gun. And I looked at her and I'm like, that doesn't mean you're safe. If you have to have an armed military escort, you are not safe. Safety is not seeing armed military anywhere nearby. And not just not seeing them, not actually being there. That's when you live free. That's when you live in a society that's safe. Yeah. If you have to have a heavy armed presence, you're not safe. You're never safe. Because
he's there to protect you from someone, or he's there to protect the government from you. Either way, it's a lose.
Right. Ostensibly, even if he's protecting you from someone else, he might also be protecting someone else from you. And it works both ways. And by the way, that's a fine line depending on what you say and do. You wouldn't go, you and I could travel to North Korea and visit North Korea. We can do that. We can go get a visa, and we're going to have a government escort. You can go around. You can take pictures. There's people online who've done it. They're like, hey, I visited North Korea. I'm an American. And you have a government-appointed chaperone the whole time. Would you feel safe?
A North Korean government chaperone, not one of ours. No, of course not. So I would never, all these people over the years who were like, oh, they got arrested in Russia for drug possession or this possession.
Right. Lee Griner got arrested with, minor amounts of drugs.
If she even had the drugs.
Exactly.
But I'm like, why are you in Russia?
It's those guys who go to Iran and visit Iran, and then they get picked up by the regime and get thrown into a prison. Like, again, it's stupid. You can't just say, I have an armed escort, I'm safe. No, you're not. You are a target.
Are you paying this armed escort? Because if you're not safe. It's just, even if you don't have an escort, you're going to a country that doesn't really care about the freedoms you have and that you're used to. Therefore, they do not apply here. Why in the world would you take that chance?
But I think the problem is people will take from this conversation is, well, don't go to sketchy places, potentially sketchy places. And police elsewhere are different than they are here. Again, it's all a matter of perspective. Like, your average white person isn't interacting with a cop on a regular basis. And if they are, it's generally not a violent and or deeply unpleasant situation when they are. And so there's no perception that they're in danger and that having an armed military or law enforcement presence is necessarily not a good thing. Like, I was raised by Cold War Iron Curtain refugees. My parents came here, sought asylum, got their citizenship. There's a different perspective on policing when you come from a place where everyone knows that the police work for the state and that they could fuck you at any time. That kind of perspective doesn't exist here for a lot of people. Too many people, in my opinion, too comfortable with police officers having the power and the authority that they do because they have this false sense of safety. Again, having armed escort, armed police doesn't make where you are safer. It means it's dangerous, fundamentally, either because of people who might be targeting the police, those whom the police are targeting or whatnot. Either way that it works. And, I think, again, this is an escalating series of law enforcement is being tied more closely to the military, and the military is being tied more closely to local law enforcement, and more of that power is starting to be subsumed to the executive branch, and more powers are being provided to it, and it's problematic that this is going on. And you're more hopeful than I am that people are going to realize that it's fucked. I think it's a major problem.
I mean, the cliche saying, history has a tendency to repeat, and you look through history and you see, all right, shit was pretty bad and people just gave up and they went for this guy and then he was really not the right answer. And then we had decades of shit that we had to deal with. Maybe this time will be different. And we're like, oh, things are like modern times now. We know so much now and so fuck up somehow. But it's never happened to a superpower before. It's never, wait a minute, they were the top dog and they became, we'll at least be remembered for that if this all does fall apart. Wow, even the top of the top can crumble to the fall by a fascist dictator. And so I'm hoping that we have some grasp that the propaganda and what people consume changes so fast now. Just like what you said earlier with that whole entire list, the litany of things that have happened so far and how we've moved from that to the next, And, you could see that on Facebook every day. Those thumbnails are just hysterical. Bombshell just happened today. Every day is a bombshell. Every day is like a disaster. Every day is like the new, some holy grail collector thing was discovered. Can't happen every single day. And so I think eventually it also will switch the other way where that's going to be a real bombshell. Just like the Epstein file. Who would think that would be such a problematic issue for the guy who kept it going? It could have easily disappeared years ago, but he put all the people in place that kept it going. And I think when you're not the sharpest tools in the shed and you only hire the people who support you, I think it backfires in the end.
Let's hope so. All right, Adam. Yourself a great weekend.
You too, buddy.
I'll catch you later.
Bye. Idiots Seeking Village is a production of Village Idiots Media. For more, find us online at villageidiotmedia.com or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and wherever you get podcasts.